Hello everybody. Thank you very much for coming, and I've spoken in many different venues, and this is probably the most intimate one I've ever had. Feels really nice. Thanks very much for the invitation to speak. I'm actually a climate campaigner activist, but my story did cross over with the Aylesbury for around 6 years, so kind of way that's probably how I ended up being asked to come and talk today. I was asked to talk about the environmental impacts of demolition and rebuild, but if I may widen the remit a little bit, what I'd like to talk about is a little bit about my story. I got involved in climate issues, a little bit about my guilt about the Aylesbury. I want to talk a little bit about the Haygate as an example of a disastrous process that leads to people's communities being destroyed. Then I'll talk about what I'm supposed to be here talking about, the environmental impacts of demolition. And then finally I want to talk a little bit about the flaws from an environmental perspective of what they're doing with the redeveloped Aylesbury. So way back in 1992, I was a ballet dancer. I didn't give a damn about the environment, and I was doing a swallow dive on the Royal Opera House stage, and my colleagues, not my friends, missed. So from 12 foot down onto my chin, hands were right out. I did manage to live, almost had an out-of-body experience. It was quite extraordinary. Anyway, my therapists were going to the Amazon with a group of alternative practitioners. One day she said somebody dropped out and said, would you like to take their place? I bit on my finger. I was a ballet dancer, not a jungle explorer. And make a long story short, I ended up by myself with the Yanomami Indians in the heart of the Amazon in 1992. And that was my awakening to the environmental destruction that we are doing to our precious planet. There were 6 million indigenous people in the Amazon when our civilization arrived. There's now less than 600,000. And that genocide goes on to this day. I remember we were 2 hours by jet from the nearest road and then 10 days by boat upriver. And I remember coming around after 10 days of going through this jungle, came around the corner, and then as far as the eye could see was this flattened landscape with a single American farmhouse in the middle of it. It was a group of fundamental Christian fundamentalists who had come and bulldozed the forest and destroyed the environment. And I ended up spending time with Yanomami who were still living a pre-industrial lifestyle. They'd lived there for 20,000 years, and the environment where they lived was pristine. And then I met the people. They had actually brought 100 of the Yanomami onto the farm, and I have never seen people with their soul gone. It was just extraordinary. 100 people living in a shack, really, so-called civilization. So I came back to London, heartbroken. Because I knew they have no concept of land ownership. It's a community that lives there, and their lifestyle lives in balance with what they take from the forest, and in some amazing ways. Some ways that they probably haven't understood keeps the balance, but it is traditional. So, for example, a hunter in their community never eats the meat that they kill, because that's their tradition. And you go, well, that's a strange tradition, but if I've got to get up in the morning, I've got to spend hours killing an animal, and I'm not allowed to greedily eat it, it reduces the amount of impetus to go and kill animals. And so they eat meat around maybe once every 10 days, and they have fish maybe once a week. If everybody on the planet did that, the impact on nature and climate would be radically reduced. So I came back to London and I thought, what can I do? And I'm a Gandhian by philosophy, which means that Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So I thought the most important thing I could do was change my life. Because there's no point in telling other people you need to change if you haven't done it yourself. I think that's one of the biggest reasons we're in the mess we're in. Too many of us are telling other people you must do this and not really doing it ourselves. So in those days I used to shop in supermarkets. Now I don't. I'm around 99% free of supermarkets. But I decided each time I went shopping, I would buy one thing organic. So in '92 I bought 1 jar of organic ketchup, and that was my start of my my journey to green my lifestyle. Now, I live in a little house just on the small little terrace house just by St George's Church, just on the other side of the park, and it's carbon negative. It's combined gas, water, and electricity bills is minus around £100, because I live a lifestyle. I live the one room lifestyle. I only heat and light the room I'm in, but also got solar panels on the roof, and this year I got a second-hand battery, so I've now got solar powered at night time as well. Over the year, the house produces twice as much energy as I use. It's got solar. It's also got a rain harvester, a composting loo, triple glazing, solar insulation. So anyway, I came back and I started doing that, and one day I was walking through the park, and I saw an area of the park that was a wildlife site under the GLC. The sign had been removed for the wildlife site had been removed, and so I said to myself, "What's going on there?" And I started looking into it, and I found out that the council was proposing to sell around 15 acres of the park, including the wildlife site, and to remove the open space protection from the entire park. And so I said to myself, well, how can I possibly campaign and defend the Amazon when the wildlife on my own doorstep is being destroyed? So I don't know what happened, but I ended up just dropping being a ballet dancer, and I woke up one day and I was a campaigner. So I set up a campaign to stop the building on the park and to save stop the sell-offs. We succeeded, but as part of that, I got the local Liberal Democrats helped me a lot, because I believe in proportional representation and green issues. They asked me if I would join them, and so I decided to do that. And within a year, they asked me if I'd be a candidate, so I ended up being a local council candidate for the Aylesbury estate. Up to then, nobody other than Labour had ever represented the estate, and we campaigned on community issues, and we stood on a platform of three things. We said we want to campaign to stop the park being built on. We wanted, the second thing, in those days, all of the estate and all of the park were being sprayed with men in moon suits with glyphosate poisons. We said we would aim to stop the estate being sprayed in poisons. And third thing, that the crime rate at the time was very high, and we said we would try and do something about the crime rate. So we stood on those three platforms, and amazingly, the people of the Aylesbury elected us as councillors. At the time, there was no regeneration project. There was a number of regeneration projects on the southern side of the park and in Bermondsey, but there was none on the Aylesbury. So I said to my colleagues, this is terrible. There's lots of issues here that need to be addressed on the estate to improve it for the people's quality of life, safety, quality of life, heating, etc. So we did a huge amount of work to pressure the council to do a refurbishment project on the Aylesbury. I led the campaign. We put together an action group, I called the Aylesbury Estate Action Group, to get that project going. And we banged and banged and banged on the doors, and nothing would happen. And eventually I remember being in the office of the chief executive, and I was just like, what can I do to get you to put attention onto Aylesbury? And I broke down crying because I was so emotionally drained from the campaign. And the door broke, and the council agreed to do a regeneration project for the estate. And this is kind of slightly where my guilt comes in, because I was an opposition councillor, not a Labour councillor. The council said, we will only do a regeneration project on the Aylesbury if you resign as chair. So I was faced with this dilemma. I felt if I resigned as chair, the vision that we had of making the Aylesbury into a really thriving community where the people could feel safe and the quality of life was good and the environment was good, and it was energy efficient, could actually be hijacked into something different, into a privatisation stroke demolition project. So I spent a couple of weeks thinking, what do I do with my conscience? If I stay as chair, am I blocking the investment in the estate? Or if I give in to the bullying from the Labour Party, will I betray the people I was elected to represent? And I made the decision to quit. And that's why I feel I want to use the word guilt, because I have carried that guilt for a long time. because I know what's happened was the opposite of my vision for the Aylesbury. And that's what happened. The council did take over, and obviously they did go down the route of privatisation, stroke eviction, stroke demolition. As my story has said, when I stopped down from being councillor after 6 years because I was involved in a huge amount of stuff, and my first passion is trying to do something about the climate and ecological emergencies. That was my top priority. So I stepped back from involvement in the Aylesbury in around 2000. What was it? 94, around 2000. So I haven't really been involved. I stayed involved in the park to try and stop the park being built on. We did deliver the 3 things we promised for the area, for the estate. We did stop the park being built on. We did stop the spraying of pesticides and chemicals on the estate. And through an amazing community initiative, not penal, not putting people in jail or attacking people, through amazing community effort, we did bring down the crime rate in the area by 50%. It was recognised internationally as a community approach of how you deal with crime, not about penalising people, but what we did, simple things like getting the police to play football with the kids, getting there was a real problem with people running through the estate after they committed crime and then not being able to cope because of the landings and the bridges, and we got the funding to get those bridges down. And the third thing was the design of the hallways. The doors you couldn't see through the doors on the hallways, so we asked for bulletproof, vandal-proof glass, so that women and vulnerable people, when they came out of the lift, could see down. And those 3 things together helped bring down the crime by 50%. So I felt very proud on that front that we did what we were elected to do, but very gutted, as you saw the emotion come up. It's been buried for a long time. Guilt about what happened with the regeneration project. I just want to talk then a little bit about there is a systemic issue around demolition and the process of decision making and process around how communities in council estates are being hijacked for a different agenda. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about is after being elected council, I was elected deputy chair of Liberal Democrats, so I ended up being 12 years at national level politics, and I saw the corruption at that level. And I wrote a book about it called The Prostitute State, of how the system gets corrupted. But one aspect of how the system is corrupted is what they call the revolving door. So at national level, it means that a politician becomes employed as a lobbyist for an oil company, and then they lobby the civil service, who then put in regulations, and the government approves the regulations to keep the corrupt oil industry operating. Well, there are supposed rules at national level to stop that, where you have to ask for permission, and there always are given permission. And there is actually no punitive measures even if you do go and sell out and you go and lobby for an oil company against the rules. There is nothing at national level to stop you doing that. But you are supposed to you are supposed to at least sign a register and ask for permission. At local level, there is no permission. There is no system for that. And so I thought what I'd do for this section, if you will bear with me, is I just thought I'd read the section. I wrote a section about the Haygate and the corruption that happened on the Haygate in this book. I wanted to write it. One of the things that we think about. I've also been a journalist writing for The Independent, but we think we've got a free press in the United Kingdom. We've got a captured press. We've got a corrupted press. But that at national level, that is a huge issue, and I've written a huge amount about how Murdoch and Dacker affect national level politics. It's horrific. But at local level, it's slightly different. The real issue at the local level, because I used to write a column for the Southwark News, and the real problem with local journalism is that if you write about a big business doing something in a community, they're facing a massive lawsuit, and Southwark News only needs one lawsuit, and they're gone. So there is a number of issues, such as the glyphosate issue and the Haygate issue, that I wasn't allowed to write about because they were terrified of being sued. So I remember when I was writing this book, and I wrote loads of stuff about people who were all suing people, and I had to read it 10, 12 times because I couldn't afford a lawyer to look at it. So I was risking my house and my entire income writing this book. But touch wood, nobody's ever sued me. So I did put in the story. I did put in the story that they wouldn't allow me write in the. So if you give me a couple minutes, is that okay? If I remember it. So the revolving door. Oh, you're objecting. Cool. So the revolving door even operates at local council level. I live in Southwark. For a generation, the council has almost completely abandoned the building of new social housing, despite having one of the largest housing waiting lists in the country. Sorry, this was written in the around 10 years ago. The council's regeneration department, what I call the bulldozing department, has embarked on the demolition of vast swathes of council housing built in the 70s. Some of the initial projects resulted in some good quality new replacement social housing at the other side of the park. But the net result has been a loss of over 7,000 social housing units, increasingly replaced with expensive apartments aimed at the international elite who want to pad in London with its favourable non-dom tax regime. The recent enormous demolition project on the Haygate at the Elephant is a prime example of local council revolving doors. I attended the project's planning application hearing in January 2013. The chair of the planning committee banned all filming, recording and photography by the press. The developer is an international corporation called Lend-Lease, who had been convicted of local authority fraud in New York in 2012, want to build 2,500 luxury flats, to replace the existing 1,200 social housing units, even though the social housing units were structurally sound. I was horrified at what else was being proposed. Despite the council having a policy of 20% renewable energy, this was in 2008, the developer included none. Out of the 2,500 homes proposed, only a token 79 were to be social housing, even though the existing 1,200 council tenants had been promised a right of return.
Yes.
Despite the council having a policy of zero parking at major transport hubs, and you don't get more major than Elton Castle, the developers were given 600 parking spaces. Despite the council having a policy of protecting trees, over 300 mature trees were to be bulldozed. Despite the council having a policy requiring space for cycling, not a single metre of cycle lanes were included in the new development. Even the streets and the public realm and open space were to be privatised. Actually, the roads in the Haygate are now private roads. I was shocked that a supposedly Labour council proposed to kick out 1,200 local families in return for just 74 social housing units. The developers were able to tear up the council's planning regulations with complete impunity. I had not reckoned on the corporate state's tentacles, reaching down so deep into my own community. I discovered that Lend-Lease had legally hired many of those overseeing the project on the council's side over the previous decade. They included Lend-Lease hired the lobbying firm founded by the former leader of Southwark Council, who had initiated the Haygate demolition proposal. Lend-Lease lobbying firm employed the Southwark councillor who was chair of the Regeneration Committee, which had agreed demolition. The council's cabinet member, who oversaw the Haygate project for 4 years, i.e. the councillor, was hired as a consultant for one of the Haygate project bidders after they lost their seat in the council elections. In 2011, Lend-Lease hired the council's own Haygate project manager to work as their Haygate project manager, as their development manager. The council's chief regeneration manager overseeing the Haygate project left the council to form his own pro-regeneration consultancy firm called, I jest you not, it's called Enter Homes.
No.
And the current leader of the council at the time was negotiating with Lend-Lease, and this is it was both Labour and Lib Dem were involved in all of this, and Tories. The Labour leader of the council at the time negotiating with Lend-Lease was given £3,200 worth of Olympic tickets for him and his partner by Lend-Lease. This project is just one example of the revolving door at local level. Anna Minton, who's come here tomorrow, in a report for Spinwatch on lobbyists and local councils, revealed that almost 20% of Southern councillors at that time were employed as lobbyists, not even waiting to retire to sell their political expertise to the corporate paymasters. Absolutely shocking. Just read a little bit more if I may. The Haygate financials, so that's, as you can see, is pretty shocking. But so their destruction of the planning system was just complete. And obviously the local community. But the financial details were extraordinary. The council, we found out the council agreed to pay the £44 million cost of evicting the community. Because the costs of evicting a community are enormous. And they agreed to pay the £15 million demolition costs. But then a leak into the media revealed that Lend-Lease, the price that Lend-Lease was paying the council for the land was 50 million. If anybody who's good at maths understands that actually is minus 9 million.
Yeah.
Minus 9 million. Because it gets worse. Very, very unusually, a plot of land came up for sale absolutely adjacent to the Haygate estate at that particular time. And so I ended up doing the maths. So what I mean saying very unusually, because the land came up for sale and was sold, we were able to find out how much it cost, how much it was bought for. And so therefore we're able to apply it, because it was exact the adjacent site, so we're able to apply the land value to the Haygate. So the leak revealed that so it wasn't a leak, it was in the public domain. The 1.5 acre site at the Elephant was sold in 2012 for £40 million. The Haygate estate was 23 acres. Again, anybody good at maths? And this was back in 2012, so you can imagine what the land was worth now. So I went and got my calculator. I actually woke up in the middle of the night and going, so I had read all the bits of things. And I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, hang on, you've got all the facts you need to do the maths. So I got my calculator and I went, okay, 1.5 acres divided by 3 multiplied by 2 gives you around 30 million an acre. 23 acres multiplied by that amount gives you 610 million. So the land was worth 610 million and got sold for minus 9. On the ground that they would, I mean, I'm being slightly unfair, there was the ground that if they made a profit, the council would get a share of the profit. But anybody knows who's involved with Lend-Lease corporations, they will always find a way that they made a loss. I haven't been able to follow it up since then. I did report this to the local auditor, district auditor, as I think gross evidence of corruption. They did acknowledge my letter, and despite my chasing them, they never followed through. And my understanding, the government soon after abolished that the district auditor role and centralised it. So nothing was ever held to account on what I consider the crime of the century in Southwark. So that was, I just thought, give you a little taste of what this means. And then going on to talk about what I'm supposed to be talking about. Sorry for actually, what's the word, imposing on your time by that.
No, it's really, really interesting.
Good, let me put on my jumper because I'm a little bit cold.
Maybe we could close this window now.
Are you?
It was really hot in here earlier on.
So basically, the extraordinary thing about the Haygate, and actually the other states at the other side of the park around where I live, is that the carbon footprint to build a building, with making the bricks, concrete, etc., it lasts for 100 years. It lasts a century. So basically, the carbon footprint, embedded carbon of a building, it'll be a century before the carbon comes back out. So what we're really doing when we build a building, we should be investing for generations. I'm kind of, bizarrely, my house was built in 1840. So the carbon emissions for that ceased to be in the atmosphere in 1940. So I'm now, every year I'm there, I'm kind of I'm benefiting from that investment. So it's now what's 1840, 1940. So I'm coming up to 40 years soon, aren't I? Sorry, another extra century. So, but what's extraordinary about this place is that houses like mine were here, and the council at the time in the 60s wanted everybody to live in good quality houses, but everybody live in the same house right across the borough. And the plan was to demolish the entire borough and build estates like the Aylesbury, linked by footbridges, going right across the park, right up to the whole borough. That was the plan. That was the vision. And of course, what that meant is that the houses and the schools and the buildings that were on this land were demolished in the 60s, in the late 60s, and the Aylesbury was built in the 70s. So that means that we threw away the carbon footprint of the existing buildings that were here, and then we built the Aylesbury. So the Aylesbury was built in the 70s. So we're only halfway through the carbon footprint that was emitted to build this estate is still going to be out there for another 50 years. And then the council, literally within 25 years of this place being built, we'll demolish and build another one. So from a carbon point of view, it's absolutely criminal. I call it this is a carbon bomb, a slow motion carbon bomb being let off by Southwark Council. Everything those councillors said in all the political parties about caring about carbon footprint is absolutely, that's a good way of putting it. It's yeah.
Fuckery, isn't it?
Any other contributions?
Tosh.
Sorry, tosh. Okay, I'll take that one. I'm on camera, so I'll use that one. It's nonsense because the maths don't make up. The maths really don't make up. It takes around 40 tons of carbon to build a flat, a 2-bedroom flat. Now, to most people, what's 40 tons? 40 tons is the emissions that you emit for a house for 13 years. So, if you demolish 5,000 homes at 40 tons per home, I don't know if I got the maths. Yeah, I did the maths here. So I did the calculation. 5,000 units on the Aylesbury, all demolished at 40 tons each. That comes out a 200,000 ton carbon bomb. And that bomb will be here for the next century. And the really problem thing about it is that it's not the carbon that's in the atmosphere 100 years' time that's really urgent. It's the carbon that's going to be there for the next 30 years that we have to be getting it down as fast as possible. And what we're doing, so that's just give you a sense of what that means. If you live in a family home, you would have to turn everything off in the home. All the electricity, all the gas would have to be turned off in that house for 70,000 years before you make up the carbon that's being emitted by Southwark Council by demolishing this estate. I think that puts it in perspective.
Well,
You know, it kind of makes me, all the work I've done to make my house carbon negative, and I'd have to do that for 70,000 years to make up for this one decision by Southwark Council. The construction and demolition and excavation for the building industry is, according to DEFRA, is 62% of the waste stream. So again, the amount of waste we make in terms of the municipal waste is a tiny fraction of the waste produced by the building industry. And the other extraordinary thing about the building industry is that 13% of everything that's produced to build buildings of construction materials that arrive on a building site, 13% of them are never used. The wood, the nails, the radiators, whatever, 13% of them just literally come onto the building site and are thrown into the skip and dumped in landfill. 13%. I remember working myself on a building site when I was younger, and just the waste was just mind-blowing. They would just, because basically they would order 100 boxes of a certain type screws, and the chippies would go through 80 of them, and then the rest they wouldn't keep them in a store for the next project. It's just like, oh, we need to get everything off site, into the bin, off it goes. It's absolute nuts. We are throwing carbon up in there to make new materials to dump in landfill. The criminality is extraordinary. The other thing that people don't understand about building is sand. The carbon footprint of sand and the ecological impact of sand is horrific. Where do you think it comes from? Can you imagine the mountain of sand used for just one building estate? A lot of the sand comes from the seabed. And so we're digging huge holes in the seabed, and the seabed, of course, once you dig, if you take all the sand off the seafloor, you're demolishing or destroying all of the ecology. 95% of the wildlife in Britain's oceans, I was there when my father was born, it's gone. 95%. Our oceans have been emptied over the last, my father's and my generation. There's pictures. I used to work on a Gaelic-speaking island off the west coast of Ireland when I was a kid, called Clara, and there's pictures there of the harbour on the island just full of boats. You could walk across the harbour, and now there's only 3 boats left. You could walk across the harbour boat to boat, because basically they said when the fish were so rich, it was just, you didn't have to go anywhere. You just had to to pull the damn things out. It was so rich. And the trawling industry and the sand industry combined are just going zzz, and just laying waste to it. And it's invisible, because of course when you look at the sea, you don't see the devastation, do you? And it's a significant part of our carbon footprint. I remember doing an article about trawling for The Independent, and I can't remember it now off the top of my head. But the carbon footprint of the fishing industry is quite shocking, not because of the oil they use for the boats, which have to go farther and farther and farther to find the fish in the emptying ocean, but actually the destruction of the stored carbon on the seabed. We've lost 95% of our seagrasses. Seagrasses are 35 times more powerful at storing carbon than the tropical rainforest, and we were surrounded by them, and we've destroyed 95% of them. So sand is another thing. When you demolish, and of course community. It takes years of getting to know people, having a cup of tea, birthday parties, events like this. Community in cities are very, very fragile, and it takes years of building them up. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm going after this at my next door neighbour. She's a 90-year-old lady. I've lived next door to her for 30 years. We have a little bit of community, because there was 1% of my ward that wasn't demolished by Southwark Council of actually demolishing everything, rebuilding. And we call it the little triangle. We've got community there, and those little bits of community are really valuable, and I really appreciate it. And then one of the reasons why I spent so much time, I spent a whole year not working to try and stop the Burgess Park being built on, was because I felt I was so blessed having a small little garden. I felt all those people who had their homes demolished and told, you're going to live in tower blocks now, and this is going to be your green space. And then you guys demolish your homes, you put them into tower blocks, you don't put any front doors on them, and then you actually say you're going to sell it off and build it. And I went, oh, no way. Not over my dead body. So that's the one thing I have managed to deliver on my doorstep, is that we have managed for 30 years to stop, well, sorry, I tell a lie. We have had 50 campaigns for them to build on Burgess Park since I got involved, and we've won 49 of them. We lost one small one at the other end of the park, where there was a sheltered housing unit was built. but there was housing estates, industrial estates, indoor private tennis centres, schools, tramways, roads, anything the council saw, oh, we need one of those, let's put it on Burgess Park. Do you think they would do it in Dulwich? Do you think they'd do it in Dulwich?
No.
No bloody way. So, but we've done that. We saved that. So that kind of brings me to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is just going forward. I managed to have the energy to run the campaigns to stop it being built on. What I didn't have the energy to do was the council was planning department was headed by a guy called Simon Bevan. Everything I believed in, he believed in the opposite, literally. Total opposite of what he did. But unfortunately, one of the problems with council officers is they turn over all the time. This guy didn't. He got stuck in there, and he was the most regressive person I have ever come across. I remember in the 90s saying, why don't we have a planning rule that all new buildings should be designed so they can take advantage of solar? A very simple idea. I didn't say, let's put solar in. I just said, let's make sure we design it so that when people have the money or want to do it, they can do it. And he blocked that proposal. No idea why. So what's happening in Southwark? There's a classic example of a new church on John Ruskin Street. The church has got a big huge wall at the front of it, and the roof is slanting. What direction? North. It will never ever.
Feng shui, mate.
It was being beautiful. All you had to do is just switch it around, facing south. The whole thing could be in a solar panel and power the church. And the same thing is happening with the Aylesbury. I remember coming to workshops in the mid-90s where local people were coming, and local people in the Aylesbury were aware of climate issues. When people tell me, looking at the environment is a middle class issue, I said, bollocks. There are people who care about the environment at every level of society, and there are people who hate the environment at every level of society. It's not a class issue. There are people who on this estate who knew in the 1990s that we had to tackle climate, and they came to workshops and they had drawings of wind turbines, and they had drawings of solar panels, and they had drawings of cycle routes. I remember that that's like 30 years ago. The local people wanted that, and it makes me so angry to see what's going up over there. Because you can actually see, okay, it's actually really good. I've never had to be able to point to the example. Look, what's wrong with what they're doing there? Just one from a solar point of view. What they've done, can you see that huge building they're building, the newest one? They've built the tallest building on the southern border of the project, overlooking the park. That means there's no solar, everything to the north of it will be overshadowed and will never ever be able to have a solar panel on it. Sheer stupidity. You could have actually had the same number of housing, with the same number of people with their nice views of the park for the private flats on the penthouse, but they've just been a bit farther back, because what you could have done is you staggered it, and you could still have the same number of houses. Sheer stupidity. Secondly, the other thing that I failed with was I remember this battle with the council since the 1990s. The officers always wanted Burgess Park to be what's the one in New York? Central Park. They had this vision of Southwark Council, Burgess Park being surrounded with tower blocks. That was their vision for it. And what was the line? They said, because the park is dangerous for, what's the phrase they used was, natives.
Dangerous for natives.
It was the natives. We were dangerous.
Yeah. We hear about that in the East, mate.
So we need to be overlooked when we're in the park. And we fought that for decades. And I didn't have, because I'm really involved in climate and ecology issues, I didn't have the energy to stop them building on the park, but I didn't have the energy to stop them putting in tower blocks and surrounding the estate with tower blocks. Sorry, the park with tower blocks. Because it's to me it's crucial because so in a way the bastards what they've done is we stopped them destroying the park by building on it, but they're destroying the park by surrounding with tower blocks. Why am I passionate about that park? Because there's up to 200,000 people living within 5 miles of this area. For your mental health, you need to be able to get away from the built environment and get out into nature. Getting into nature that's surrounded by tower blocks is not getting away from the built environment. I remember the extraordinary thing during lockdown was it was kind of, I felt I kind of lost my park because it was absolutely packed. And it didn't, oh wow, what are all these people? And I couldn't cope with it. And so I used to go for walks in the middle of the night during lockdown, and I used to feel my park and feel a bit closer to nature. But what I remember feeling, all that work that we did to stop it being built on was really worth it. Because that was gold during lockdown.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people here for your mental health.
Yeah.
And the idea that if this lockdown happens in 30 or 40 years' time, that would be surrounded by tower blocks is an outrage. And so there is a proposed tower block on the old scrapyard, and we're fighting that. We're succeeding in that. We defeated them on the planning committee. But all along the by St George's Church, there's a proposal. I think it's 20-story tower blocks. So all of that. I have been successful. Anything that's proposed for the park and the scrapyard is. We fought for it to be designated parkland, so it is part of Burgess Park, even though it is a scrapyard. We went to 3 public inquiries to maintain its open space designation for that and the entire park. So I've won all those, but what I haven't had the energy to do, or lead a campaign to do, or work with others to do, was to stop the tower blocks. I just didn't have it in me. I just didn't have the energy. So what I'm saying is, I suppose coming to the end of what I was talking about is that if, as well as the campaign, obviously to try and stop the remaining demolitions, is that any proposals for new block, if any of you have the energy to get involved to support that, actually the principle that the park is precious. The council, as I was saying, they want it surrounded by tower blocks. I just does my head in. And they're also now putting a 2-month application to have events in the park, commercial events. So they promised us when they came up with the proposal to refurbish the park, they were going to demolish 12 to 1,400 trees, including legacy trees. And I led a campaign. We won around. We saved 2/3 of the trees, and we won some of the battles, but we didn't win all of them. But why am I telling you that? I can't remember why I was telling you that. There's a reason. Forgotten it. Events. Thank you. And so I found out they were going to create an arena. It was used the word arena that would accommodate 100,000 people. And I went loopy, and I did a huge campaign, and they backed down, and they said, okay, we're not going to ever have events here. We'll have just the 1 day a year, and they backed down. And now here they are 10 years later, 2 months. Can you imagine if in Dulwich they proposed to surround Dulwich Park with 20-story tower blocks, and then turn Dulwich Park into a 2-month-long private events venue? What would happen? The barristers, it wouldn't happen.
Exactly, it wouldn't happen.
The barristers would be out. They would be saying you're ruining the value of our homes, blah blah blah. And I don't understand why a Labour council continually does this to its own people.
None of
Labour,
us understand this.
Okay, I stand corrected. I'm not a Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is a Tory. Yeah, that's where my politics are. So that's kind of it, really. I mean, I took Southwark News to show them that development. I said, the London Mayor says he's committed to solar. There's no solar. The London Mayor is committed to, you have to have trees with climate change, with the rising temperature. And so you have to have loads of trees. Anybody who was, the horrific, we all know what it was like in London during the 40-degree temperature last year. The difference between being on a street that has got a tree canopy and a street without a tree canopy was just extraordinary. And the Mayor said he's committed to having street trees. And the third thing, he's committed to having a cycle network. this whole estate's been designed without a cycle network, without solar, and without street trees. What the hell? It's nuts. Anyway, so that's kind of what I had to say. Sorry, questions, good.
Thank you. Is there any merit to, because in Newham we have a very similar, we have 42 stories, you can't make it up. But we're looking into what it does to our neighbourhood losing the sunlight for most of the afternoon, so in the shadow, in the shades.
Sure.
What your experience is with that. And also we're looking into flight paths of birds, whether that is disrupted because it's 42 stories, it's humongous. But what is your experience with that, or could that be something used here as well?
The problem with a lot of these projects is that, as I said, the rules might be there in Newham's local plan, that they may have rules about overshadowing, and they don't have any rules. But then,
It's labour as well.
okay, so their local
Same.
plan doesn't have those issues.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
so
need to just fight.
the only thing you could possibly do on the bird plat thing, or I mean, one of the things that's going to happen here if they put in, the park is amazingly blessed with bats. So I'm really concerned if they put a whole wall of tower blocks along this side of it, what's going to happen to those? And that usually gives you more, if they're, especially the rarer bats, that can be a real issue. So if you're looking about bats, and maybe get in touch with, have you been in touch with London Wildlife Trust to see whether they have able to give you some advice on what's happening with the local biodiversity? Because that's one of the ways we won when they wanted to build on the people know where the new Church Road wildlife site is? When they wanted to build on that, we got the London Wildlife Trust to do an ecology assessment of it, and they were able to say it was the only wildlife site in the whole northeast of the borough, and and they then they had a list of all of the biodiversity was on the site, and that helped us win that battle. We've had that battle 4 times. They kept wanting to build on New Church Road wildlife site. I think we've now saved the wildlife site, but now they're going to destroy it. But the council itself is building a 10-story tower block right beside the wildlife site. So just nuts. So, sorry if it can't be more helpful, but maybe London Wildlife Trust might be able to give you some advice on that.
Yeah.
So is it actually the council that is building it, or you mean that they're doing what they did before and they gave?
Good question. I think it's a council development. There's one block, the 10-story block. I mean, what's very weird is it's a long, narrow site, and all they had to do is to put the tower block on the other end of the site, and it wouldn't have destroyed the wildlife site. And they insisted on putting the car park and the access stuff on the other side. It just wouldn't move. But that's just one. It's called the what's it called? The Burgess Industrial Park. Is that what it's called? Anybody local?
Yeah, Burgess Industrial.
Burgess Industrial Park. It's just over there by St George's Church. There's an international developer. The council has one side and the developer has the rest of it. He bought it for a song, and it's based obviously in a tax haven. So that makes me even more angry that the profit from what's going on, it's not going to be invested in the community, it's going to be siphoned offshore. So not even going to pay for local services, which makes me absolutely livid. But so it's going to be huge, the whole thing, and they want to actually they even want to put a road from the estate into the park through the wildlife side. And the council thinks it's a brilliant idea. When we went to meetings with the council planners were going, their first comment was, "Oh, we're really interested in this project. So we want to know how much we can charge, how much, what did they say? We want to know how much apartments can go for in this part of the borough." That's what the planners said. It's like, what? Okay, I thought you're not interested in what impact this has on the community, how we could do this in a constructive way. I'm not objecting to we do need more housing, but how we do housing and what balance there is and where it's put are huge issues. We have a huge amount of space in London devoted to cars, and actually that reminds me a little bit of what I didn't say about the Aylesbury really. What I missed out in my part of the story was I was asked to lead a delegation to the council meeting after I'd ceased being a councillor, the action group, and don't know if you remember, is it Jason? Tony?
It is Jason.
I was asked to lead the delegation when the council was making the decision which so I was ended up speaking at it. And what happened was, the cost to refurbish the estate was 250 million back in 94. The cost of demolishing and rebuilding it was 3.5 billion.
Oh.
And the reason why they argued that they had to go for demolition instead of refurbishment was that they couldn't get the money. They couldn't get the refurbishment money, but they could get the demolition rebuild money because they would do partnerships.
Minus 9 million.
Sorry?
The minus 9 million.
So I personally of the view that was rubbish because let's say, okay, it was 250 million. So let's say you say, okay, the demolition and rebuild project is what, 30-year project? More? It's at least 30. So it's a 30-year project, you're going to spend 3.5 billion. So if Southwark Council invested, and they have that money, invested 10 to 20 million every year. I mean, this estate hasn't been touched since the start of the project. Sorry, these blocks. So it would have been the same thing. They could have worked through. What was the problem with the Aylesbury? I mean, the people who lived on it might correct me. I was just a councillor for it, knocking on doors and delivering leaflets and trying to represent you guys. But the real issues were, first of all, building an estate with no front doors. What I mean by that is, they built tower blocks with what, 100, 200, 300 families? And no front door. That's like saying, that's like my living in my street and everybody living with their doors open.
Yeah.
Absolutely stupid, simple mistake of this damn architect who built this place. And that was doable. That was doable. What you do is you put in security doors, or you put in what you call concierges. And if you put on the rent, or not on the rent, you put in council, you put in a concierge. So you make the place defendable. Because what happened in the 90s was that because these were wide open, people were coming in and doing all sorts of, people were being mugged, people were shooting up drugs on the stairwells. It just, there was rubbish everywhere, and it felt like a dangerous environment. Why? Because it didn't have what everybody else had. A damn front door. It's that simple. So that was the first problem with the estate. The second problem with the estate was, are there any car drivers here? Oh really?
No, wow.
Well, I am.
That's really unusual that you are the minority, isn't it?
It's just a hybrid.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just more.
I love this. This is my world.
Right.
I'm a passionate. I will absolutely put my hands up. I
Well.
hate cars. What they do to communities, what they do to human beings, and what they do to children is an abomination in my view. It should not be done in cities. Anyway, going back to the Aylesbury, they designed the Aylesbury for the damn car. And they thought, it's like, what we'll do is we'll create this first floor walkways and bridges, and we'll get people away from cars, and it'll be fantastic. Of course, everybody saw what happened, is that people walk, you have to get to your house on the ground floor. And what it meant was that we had miles of garages, no trees, no shrubs, designed for crime. Nobody overlooked the street. On my street, everybody's got their front windows. Their living room overlooks the street. So we're all kind of providing security for each other. Who's providing security for the woman or for the nurse coming back at night, walking along? I can't remember the name of the road with all the garages. So that was a design flaw, but that was a design flaw that was dealable with. We were doing it as council. We campaigned to get the bridges down. The next step, of course, was to actually start doing something about those garages, the empty garages, try and get the garages and maybe actually turn them into flats. And instead of having car parking concrete for miles, you put gardens. And so you change the atmosphere and the ambience of the estate from one that's concrete jungle, that's not the right word, but concrete dead zone, I think it's a better phraseology for it, from a concrete dead zone to actually where people look after each other, see each other, have a bit of greenery, and it's actually somewhere nice to live. That wouldn't have cost a lot of money. And the third thing is actually what we talked about, about going back to this, which is that the carbon footprint of it, obviously, is that 39%, let me get my facts right. 39% of all carbon emissions in the United Kingdom come from construction and buildings. So what they mean by that is from building them and running them. That's nearly 40% of our carbon emissions. A quarter of that is the building, and nearly 3/4 is the running of it. So I'm going back a bit. So what the argument is that the Aylesbury wasn't built as an energy efficient building because energy was really cheap. So you've got these heating on that you can't turn on or off, which is, it's just a nightmare. So basically most of the time, I remember visiting my constituents when I was a councillor, most of the people would be in their shorts with the windows open because they couldn't turn on or off the heating. And so what happened was the people on the Aylesbury had a more expensive, because they have to pay it through their rent, they had a higher energy bills than I did living in a house on a private road.
It's nuts.
Absolutely nuts. So the argument was it's very inefficient, so we need to get demolish and rebuild because maybe not well insulated enough. But actually, when you look at the actual ACOM, and even REBA now accept what we were arguing 30 years ago, is that you can get, by deep refurbishment, you can actually get the same energy efficiency as new build. So what does that mean? It actually means that there's no carbon saved by demolishing and rebuilding, but there is an expense, the expense of building it. So you're in a net massive negative by doing this, because as I say, so what they were saying, well, you could cut the energy efficiency by demolishing and rebuild. You could reduce the energy consumptions maybe by half to 2/3. But you can do that by refurbishment as well. And what's interesting, what I didn't know then, what I know now is because I fund my campaigning by I advise charities how to be green as an eco-auditor, is that what we need to do there's two areas of energy consumption on an estate. One is the heating, which is gas powered, and the other obviously is electricity use. The national grid has got significantly greener since the estate project was decided. So what I mean by that is over the last 10 years we've eliminated coal almost entirely. So our electricity is now greener than our gas. 10 years ago, electricity was 3 times dirtier than gas. And every year that goes on, that electricity will be getting greener and greener. And so what we need to do to get to zero carbon is we need to move away from gas completely and move to, am I running over time?
We are a little bit,
Okay,
because
sure.
the people cannot get into the here to
Okay, I'll
to
just finish in
look
2
around the
minutes.
exhibition,
No problem.
and then they are stuck here, and I'm really sorry.
That's
but,
fine.
It's an exhibition, and
I
people wanted to see the exhibition.
I asked somebody for a clock, and because I
Thank you.
couldn't know when I had time. We got to
No, it's
finish
just-
this last
yeah.
point.
You're not over time, Donnachadh.
Am I not?
No.
Okay.
It's yeah.
What
It's
time is it?
58 minutes you've been talking for.
How long? 58.
2 minutes.
Okay. What was I saying? Carbon.
Carbon footprint.
Electricity.
Electricity. Sorry.
Electricity,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the national grid.
Thank you. Somebody's listening to me. What we need to do is to move away from gas-powered heating, and we need to move to some form of electric heating. And one of the cheapest capital ways of doing that is infrared heaters. So what we could do is actually, make 3 infrared panels on the ceiling of this roof, allied with a green tariff, could make this flat zero carbon, without spending £3.5 billion to do it. So that's my final point. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, please.
Yes.